Kelianne Crapo, President of Property Management at Peak Living. Thank you so much for joining us in our Rhino Housing Innovation Council. To get into it with you, from where you sit, overseeing a large portfolio of multifamily properties spanning more than 20 states, I want to talk to you about, from an operational perspective, how has COVID-19 changed your outlook and your operations and caused you to potentially rethink anything about your business?
Right. It's, of course, created a lot of change for us, some of it very quickly, as most of the country has been dealing with this pandemic that happened very quickly and unexpectedly. As of last month and even the month before, we collected over 95% of what was billed to all of our residents in that current month. Here in the month of June, we're at June 22nd today, we're at 92.3% collected for the month, which is, I think consistent with some companies, but also a lot higher than others. And being able to close at 95% collections on what has been billed in an environment where many people are living paycheck to paycheck or have lost their jobs has been a huge impact to our business and us being able to continue to perform in this environment. And I know that that connection and that contact with our residents has made a huge impact, because they are more willing to pay us than other bills that they may have, because we have personally called them, reached out to them, asked how we could help. And even times on some properties, we've delivered things to the door where we know residents have needed it. On some of our senior communities, helping get food delivered, of course, delivering water, supplies, laundry detergent, all of those services that have been a bit restrictive, especially when we first started this COVID restrictions back in mid-March. So that's been huge. Of course, still all of the technology, I think, is still key. Having those online payment portals open so residents have the ability to pay rent online, lease online, so we can continue our normal operations. But I will say that personal phone call, which we've gotten rid of the last few years because of technology and everyone wanting to do things from their phone and their iPad, that it's been a real eye-opener that people do still really like that personal one-on-one connection in person as well.
Super helpful, Kelianne. A lot of data you threw out there about rent collection, which is something that's top of mind across the country in multifamily. One thing that a lot of folks are very interested in and love to get your take on is leasing velocity, both during COVID and the immediate, kind of day-to-day future, but also in the months and years ahead. Take us under the hood of Peak's business. Have you seen, any sort of discernible slowdowns in new leases signed, renewals signed? What are you thinking about that, kind of moving forward?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And ironically, I think we all thought that our leasing would stall out more than what it has. We've had a few pockets where COVID, I think, had a larger impact, especially on the residents or the demographic in those locations where it did slow a little bit. But for the most part, our seasonality of leasing being higher these summer months has still continued to do that. Of course, technology plays a huge part in that. With Peak Living, our biggest, I think, hurdle with that is our breakdown of our properties. So we do have a lot of low income housing and tax credit properties where some of that online capabilities you just don't have in that environment with the amount of paperwork and certifications that need to be completed. But for the most part, I think leasing was still there. People still needed places to live. People that were not happy where they currently were living may have postponed moving for maybe a few weeks or a month or two, but I think a lot of people that still needed housing still needed legitimate housing. And so being able to provide that to them, even during the midst of a pandemic, was huge. And I know a lot of those residents were extremely grateful that we could still accommodate and facilitate getting them into an apartment.
Absolutely makes sense based on the data you cited and kind of anecdotal evidence there. I want to ask you, obviously from where you sit overseeing Peak Living's portfolio, 20 plus states all across the country, are there any regions or states or cities in particular where, you expect in a positive way, potentially more growth and we should be focused on, or maybe that you're particularly concerned about, in sort of seeing potential slowdowns, not just in Peak's world, but, as a multifamily industry community?
I definitely think that for us and where we own our properties that we will see a little bit more of some struggling submarkets. I think Florida has been one that has been more affected, of course, with the tourism that's associated with the state, along with, some of those amusement areas that have been closed down and where our properties are located. So I can't speak to every property in Florida, but where our properties are located in our resident demographic and some of our lower income housing that we have there, that really was where most of our residents were coming from, are people in those service type industry and tourism. And so that definitely has probably been our biggest state that struggled the most. And hopefully with things starting to open up here in the next few weeks, I know Universal Studios, Disney's announced dates of those openings. We'll start to see that turn around and hopefully turn around very quickly. But that's definitely an area that we're more keen to, and we're providing a lot more resources to try and stabilize and help. Outside of that, we did have, probably South Carolina and then Nashville were probably our other two areas that saw a little bit more of a hit than others. South Carolina, I think, again, where our properties are located, just very much, the workforce and a lot of large industrial manufacturers out there that, either restricted their hours, cut back on employees or even closed doors temporarily as this was going on. So again, I think that it will recover. It just might be a little bit longer of a recovery period. And then again, Nashville, I think mostly just because of the tourism and where our properties are located and our demographic is more of that tourism and service clientele. But overall, I think many other states were really surprised to see how well a lot of them did, and areas that we thought would struggle more didn't struggle. And we have quite a few sites, at least, 50% of our properties that have collected 100% of what was billed. So even despite, of course, what is going on, there are still a lot of very strong areas. Utah, I think, is still going to be very strong, and we'll still see that growth here. And I'm sure you've heard that from other people you've spoken with, but not seeing, Utah as affected as other areas. Texas, another area that we think will pick right back up and is definitely another hot area of growth for not just us, but I think, in general, just population growth and more expansion there.
You've talked a little bit about the concept of assistance, some of the great work that Peak has done to be kind of a good partner with residents who may be in need during COVID-19's crisis or otherwise. One of the things we're doing in bringing together this innovation council and government leaders, business leaders such as yourself, the concept of public sector and private sector proactive partnership, and solution development. Talk to us a little bit about how Peak and yourself view, relationships and engagement with leadership at, the city council member level, mayor level, state government, both proactive and during a crisis. Love to get your perspective there.
I think overall the goal of both is the same, and that is, of course, safety of the residents, whether it's at our community or in the city, along with making sure that, emergencies are addressed appropriately and people have safe, clean, and appropriate housing. I'm sure is important to them as well as it is to us. And so the more that we can work together and provide, resources that they have that we may not be aware of, and the more that we can provide what we need to our residents, I think the better it will be for everyone involved. And had there been more discussions, I think, with property owners and or, operators, that we could have worked with city officials and or some of those representatives to deliver the messaging in a more appropriate way that would have benefited everyone.
So Kelianne, you've spoken a bit, sort of about the concept of accessibility, financially. Peak Living is obviously a partner with Rhino in offering, a security deposit replacement solution. Talk a little bit about, how you view solutions like Rhino's that, are attending to the needs and challenges of owners and renters, and, kind of where you think a solution such as Rhino sits in the, the future of the multifamily ecosystem. Yeah,
no, that's a great question. I think Rhino offers a great opportunity for many residents that could not afford to move to a community they would want to, maybe because of deposit amounts and or their credit scores, that gives them that opportunity and an extra, security level that, of course, allows the resident to maybe move into something a little bit nicer, a little bit better than where they've come from, but also allows the protection for the owner and or the operator to, let their restrictions down a little bit and say, hey, we have this, other entity that is going to back this person up, so to say, and that's going to provide us an extra incentive and or security blanket so that we can let some of these people move in. So I think over the next few years, as we continue to deal with COVID until it's done, especially over the next 6 months, as the moratorium's lifted, and I think some people will be forced to leave because they didn't pay for whatever reason, whether that's that they couldn't afford it financially, they were affected personally and were out of work, they didn't get the federal assistance that they needed. But it will give these people that legitimately had, good credit up until this, an opportunity to still get into housing that is not only, works for them, but is still safe and is in a good location and provides them some of all of those things we want all renters to be able to have in the comfort of their home, a good, safe place to live with, a company or a property where they are taking care of the assets and they really do want what's best for the resident as well.
Final question for you, Kelianne. We've talked about a lot of challenges facing both the United States, renters, property owner, managers, multifamily industry. I want to get you here. One reason as a business leader in the multifamily world that you are optimistic, about the months and years ahead.
Yeah, of course we're optimistic, right? I mean, everyone at some point needs housing, and as long as we have housing that's available to residents and we keep it clean and we take care of it, I have no doubt that we'll be successful, and hopefully we can continue to grow partnerships with other people that will continue to advance that, and of course expand it just outside of the housing itself and provide other services to our residents that they could also use.
Kelianne Crapo, President, Property Management at Peak Living, member of Rhino's Housing Innovation Council. Kelianne, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.